Hey gamers, welcome to Video Games, the segment. I'm Brian Woods.
And I'm Francisco Meléndez. And man, Brian, I sure hope no Pokemon fans kill me today because I have some opinions on this game.
I also have opinions that someone might dislike. This is a divisive one.
Yeah, but you know, the good thing is that humble, old, tiny Pokemon company has so many people online that are ready to defend them, you know?
Yeah, people really ready to fall on a sword for the biggest entertainment media franchise of all time in any form of media on this rock that we live on.
Yeah, no, you could almost say that they are the shield for the company. It's Pokemon Sword Shield, people.
Yeah, it came out. What do you think? You tried to snap with gloves on. And
yeah, no,
frankly, I
have these pointless gloves like I'm a Pokemon protagonist. Like, what? Where's my sense of fashion today? Anyways, so these games are kind of difficult for me because if you're just looking for a good game that'll entertain you, I can't really object to these games too much. But having played almost every other Pokemon game with the exception of Gold and Silver, I have to say, like, I can't really recommend these games because having seen just, like, everything they take out, everything they've put into this game, it really does feel like the worst possible version of the Pokemon experience you could get. Except it has better graphics, I guess, than the DS games.
Yeah.
And even then, it's not like if someone said, "Oh, I'm just playing Breath of the Wild for the graphics," well, that's kind of weird. But like, I get it, you know. But like, this game, like, it's
kind of looks like trash sometimes.
Legitimate. I noticed one thing. Like, if you go to the wild area, it's just a bunch of like boring expanse land, but you have more stuff to do. And when you're in the routes, you're in these tiny, tiny little corridors that look really pretty, but it's like I'm walking down this narrow hallway, like an axe murderer is gonna come out and kill me. But it's just like a conqueror or something.
Have you been to the wild area online, connected to the internet?
Oh, no. Okay.
You live in the dorms, that's right. Mizzou, I don't know why, but you just don't like it when people connect to the internet.
Because they hate us.
You know, it really gives me time to reflect because the game slows down to such a degree. I have time to meditate in between frames.
Oh, no.
Because the game kind of just self-destructs at that point. Not sure why.
I heard you talking about that, and I was like... I remember one time you were talking about, like, oh, every time I go down the ladder, like, all the other Pokemon freeze. And I had never noticed, but now every time I...
Sorry, I ruined it.
Oh, yeah, no, huge spoiler. But now that I go down the ladders, I notice Sneasel's coming out to kill me, but then it just stops in its tracks, like...
Yeah.
And I'm just... What?
Like, graphical stuff aside and the cut Pokemon, I do think this is the best roster and best new Pokemon. I thought about this, Francisco, and this is a hot take, and I thought about it, and I meditated on it. And I'm going to go as far back as I can because nostalgia is going to cloud me, but this is the best generation of new Pokemon. It's better than 5, it's better than 6,
Definitely.
And it's better than 7.
And
I think it's probably better than 3.
Yeah,
I think the Pokemon in this game are really good. I think... There's a lot of standouts, like Hatterene.
Hatterene's amazing. Like
Berserker. I just said that because you hate him, but I think you're wrong. He's
really
fine.
do hate him.
Appleton is fine.
Good boy.
I don't think there's a single Pokemon in this roster that I look at and dislike on any kind of strong level.
I have a few, like Ice Cube, the penguin with a block of ice on his head. Like,
he's weird looking. I like it. I like his style, Francisco.
No. There are a few here and there, like, I will say, I do agree, like, at first I was hit or miss on it, but the more I looked at it, if you look at Gen 7, 6, or 5, like, the worst Pokemon are in those rosters are, like, bad designs. But in this one, the worst ones are just kind of, like, Pokemon like Dreadnought, which I think is just kind of bland.
You're
or
kind of wrong. You know what?
It's bad.
They're fine. Like, even the worst Pokemon on this roster, no matter anyone's really opinion, are, like, they're fine. And I like most of them. But none of them are bad. And, you know, the dress-up game, which is a weirdly important part to me for video games, the dress-up game, stronger than ever.
I will say one thing is I would have thought by now they would have added more initial options for customization because they still have, like, 2 white dudes, then, like, tan and black. I would have thought they would have broadened it more by now.
I don't know. I mean, like,
kinda...
Japan is kind of weird with skin tones. I mean, up until Pocket Camp, if you wanted to play as a darker skinned person in Animal Crossing, you just had to tan, which is kind of a weird one. So they're just kind of getting there. They're just kind of getting there. So it kind of met my expectations with, like... options
Yeah.
of people.
You know,
Not a great variety, but you know.
But really enough, that does tie with my main issue with these games, and it's that a lot of the things that I feel people will be like, wow, they really went there, they're really doing this, are things that we should just expect from a video game. Like being able to turn our camera, controlling volume, more customization options, the ability to train your EVs and IVs a lot more easily. Like, to me, that should just be in the game. That shouldn't be something where, like, you lose so much of the Pokédex. And for me, the worst part is that the strongest part of this game for me is, like, all of the interactions you can have with your Pokemon and stuff like that. But then some of my favorite Pokemon, like Absol, Meloetta, Swanna, are just gone from this game. So, I can use some of my favorites, but then others are just gone, so I can't really take advantage of all this like good stuff they put in for me.
And you know, final thing for me that I do think is kind of a weird positive about this game is that even though the story is just as bad and non-existent as most of them, except for 5, the character work is kind of good. You haven't beat the game, but something I can appreciate about a story is that every character in this game kind of ends up in a very different place from where they started, which is not something I can say for any other Pokemon game. It's like your rival is still going to just be a worse version of you. This guy's still going to be this. But they do all end up and they have a different lot in life by the end of the game. And you can't speak to that because you haven't beat the game or anything. But like I played it, I'm like, wow, what a development. What a basic storytelling technique from this video game that I just didn't expect.
Yeah, this is kind of controversial, but the only Pokemon game I've played that like I liked the story was Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald, and the remakes, because
you were 7.
No, I played them like they're actually really enough the most recent games I've played, but like Pokemon Black and White, I recently went back to them, and I've noticed Game Freak has a problem with like overstuffing their stories. Which is kind of what I liked about this game, like story, is that it's so simple. Except for whenever Sonia shows up and she's like, hello, children, time to learn about Galar History, chapter 37.
You talk about her like she's 80 and not like 22.
And she sounds 80. She's very boring, like all 80-year-olds are famously. Except Opal, she's dope.
So
she slaps.
Weirdly, I recommend this game. It is it's one step forward, one step back for me, but I did really enjoy it.
If you go online and you get Pokemon Emerald ROM, it is free, and you can just play Pokemon Emerald, which is the best Pokemon game of all time. It is technically kind of legal, so you can do it.
Have a good one, folks. I've been Brian Woods. For more content, mutv.missouri.edu.
Which Pokemon do you want to date? Be sure to tweet us at MUTV23. Don't be creepy, please.